We're back, and this week on the Fair Dinkum department, is JWH too big a liability for the Roosters? I'm sure Buzz has plenty to say about that. We have a little bit as well. Does Ricky Stewart need to look inwards? Has Phil Gould backed the wrong horse? Is our man Cameron Murray, is he the right captain for the Souths? Tough one trying to follow Sam Burgess there, so lots to talk about. And finally, does the minor premiership even matter? Who cares who raises the shield? Outrage, there's absolutely plenty of it, especially at the pointy end of the season. We're going to decide if it's real or ridiculous. I'm Chris Danks, you're Liam O'Loughlin. We are the Fair Dinkum department. I only just got through that intro. I started about 7 times. Let's talk round 26. For me, first game was the best. Panthers losing, didn't see it coming. I thought the Eels played pretty well. That was a great way to start off the round. Obviously, the Sharks losing sucked, but here we are.
There were some decent games over the weekend. I thought the Broncos and Raiders was a decent enough game of footy. Storm and Titans I quite enjoyed as well. Saturday afternoon. Titans really hung in there for a while. They got a few players out too. Ryan Pappenhausen back on the field, so that's always exciting times. But yeah, it was a good weekend of footy, but I think everyone's got one eye on the finals now.
It was interesting listening to Brett White, who's up at the Titans now, his presser yesterday, so Monday, and he was giving big vibes of let's just get through this game and like everyone take a break. I'm a bit over it. I think it seems like it's been a really long footy season, maybe because we didn't really have an off season with the World Cup. How are you going as a Dragons fan?
Oh, yeah, I mentally checked out of the Dragons like 6-8 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Just looking forward to next season now, bringing in a new coach, hopefully a couple more players, and maybe some ones moving on at the end of the year. But yeah, I've certainly checked out of watching the Dragons and their performances. They've hung in there well, to be fair. They haven't got blown out really too often lately. So they're trying hard. They're just probably lacking a bit of quality, and they've got a few blokes on the sidelines, which isn't helping. But your Sharkies seem to be going reasonable, even though the weekend was a bit of a hiccup.
Yeah, they'll finish in the top 8, which should be, I don't know, maybe we'll be one and done. Who knows, after last year.
Possibly.
A little bit of me died. But we'll start with the Roosters, Jared Warrior-Hargreaves. There's a lot going on, so help me out if I stuff up anywhere. Could be facing up to 7 weeks on the sideline for 2 different incidences.
In the space of like 30 seconds.
Yeah, it was tough. So he's taken the 3 for striking, for that headbutt, which I don't know what you were thinking. And I think whoever was the Getty photographer has done an amazing job because they've done it frame by frame. It just looks like they're just having like a really nice embrace, not a huge man mountain headbutting someone else. He's contesting the grading for the dangerous contract. It's a grade 2 at the moment. If he gets done tonight, Tuesday night, 4 matches. If he gets downgraded, it's a fine. Woof! But so either way, he's not playing in the Roosters clash, or pretty much the entire final series.
Yeah, so
he'd be back for the grand final, wouldn't he, if they made that far?
So if he does get a downgrade to a grade 1 for the dangerous contact, and I believe it was Api Coruscant, he'll miss 3 matches, which means he would be back for a prelim final if the Roosters happen to make it that far. But if he's unsuccessful and he cops the 4 weeks, naturally he is out for the rest of the season and the start of next year. I did read that they're possibly looking at whether or not, if he does get the 7 games, whether or not New Zealand's test at the end of the year. And apparently he might not have even been factored into their plan. So I'm not entirely sure how that will work out. Fingers crossed for Jared and for the Roosters that he can get this downgrade and hopefully put himself back in the frame if the Roosters can get themselves deep into the finals. But I don't like his chances.
Yeah, I don't like his chances at all. If it was a clean skin, maybe, but his record, not great.
Yeah, it's not a great record.
So Buzz, he's labelled him as a liability. It was on Monday when he said this. That's usually when he's at his spiciest. Hargreaves got got 1 year left on his contract. I thought he's been playing pretty well this year. I think they're a better team with him on the park. 2-parter. Do you think the Roosters are better with him on the park? And then, obviously, are you team Buzz or not so much?
I definitely think they're a better team with Jared on the park. We've seen that throughout this year especially. They've obviously been up and down, but the really good performances that they've had, Jared has been leading from the front. He missed the first couple of games, I think, of the season, and they started a little bit shakily. I think they lost to the Dolphins in round 1 and he wasn't there. He came back in round 3 for a big game against South. They won that. They beat Para the following week as well, and he was really good in both those games. He's played 18 games this year for a 34-year-old front rower.
Yeah.
18 games out of 23 so far. That's not too bad, to be honest. He's had a few little niggles he's had to deal with here and there. I don't think he's been suspended this year, which is a half miracle, but it's come back to bite him on the arse at the business end of the season. Look, I don't think Jared is as much of a liability as some might make him out to be. He does have, the odd brain snap, or, he's a player that plays to the line, and there are occasions where he's probably going to step a little bit over it.
Australian cricket team style. We headbutt the line.
But you want someone in your team like that.
100%
Any other team, like outside the top 8, I know the Roosters are like 9th at the moment, but they're half a chance of making the semis. They would love someone like Jared in their team that is going to lead from the front. You know exactly what you're going to get from him. If it does, go pear-shaped every now and again, that's just the consequence you've got to pay. But for what Jared has brought to the Roosters over, a decade and a half almost since he's been in the club, I think calling him a liability is probably a little bit of a stretch. This was a brain explosion the other night. That's all it was. They had the game won. He didn't need to do what he did, both with the high tackle and the headbutt. But for the most part, I think what Jared brings to the Roosters from a positive perspective certainly outweighs the negatives that do come, maybe once or twice a season.
100%. You've been ridiculous, Buzz. You are a goose. No, but all right. So I always put it as, if you could have Jared doing that, right? You don't want it to happen, but if that's going to happen from your front row, great. Compare that to maybe like who can we throw under the bus? Jordan Rapana, like tripping and everything. Rapana. Like, if you're gonna have a winger do it,
how does he keep getting away with it? Honestly, it's like every second week he does something. He doesn't get suspended. I think that's what people were saying about Jared for a long time as well, and now it's come back to bite him, as I said. But look, I don't know. Everyone says, the good old days of having an enforcer in your team. Jared is probably the last of a dying breed in that respect. I know Victor Radley has said that himself and Jared are probably playing in the wrong era, and I probably agree with that to a certain extent. But he's probably the last true enforcer in the NRL, Jared, and sometimes that is going to work against you. And for the Roosters, they've just got to deal with it. They've got depth there in the forwards, so look, I don't think it'll be too much of an issue for them against South personally, but they would obviously love to have him there.
So you're on the Roosters train.
I think
joining
so.
Me.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially with South, like I'm just talking this round 27 clash, which is essentially whoever wins, sneaks into the finals. I think with South missing Latrell, Teddy will be back for the Roosters. Joey Manu's up in the air, but even then, like, he played fullback on the weekend. It'll just be Teddy straight back in. The Roosters are in form. South are terribly out of form. I like the Roosters. They will miss Jared, but they've got enough depth there that I think they can get the job done.
Rabbitoh's bringing in dogs for motivational speaking. I just don't know how that works. Jesus Christ, what a place. On to Canberra. Ricky Stewart drama, which has had a little bit of late breaking news. We'll just go through the backstory. Raiders have lost 3 of the past 5, so big chance of missing the finals. Play the Sharkies this Sunday.
They have a horrendous for and against. It's like minus 120.
Yeah, they have to win or they're cooked.
Yeah.
Ricky, as always, can be a little bit sooky. One of the game's great players, and can never hold a candle to him with that, but does love a little bit of a sook. Made journos wait for an hour for the post-game presser versus the Broncos. Then there was this whole swearing at the Fox Sports camo.
It's not the first time he's done it either.
No, he loves it. But that's probably the confusing bit about it. It's like, mate, you've been in the game forever. Like, there are cameras around. Get it together. Blasted the officials after the loss. It's always their fault. Sometimes there's definitely elements of that, but not all the time. Now Fox Sports have come out. Steve Crawley, who's the big dog there, has come out this morning and said, we shouldn't have got in his face. We even agree with Ricky, we don't do that on the sideline. If you look at the vision, the camo is like 5 meters at least behind the chairs. There's nowhere near his face.
There's a fair bit of conflict of interest in rugby league whenever something negative around Ricky Stewart does come up. Obviously, last year he had that big blow up at Jamin Salmon, and there were a lot of people jumping to his defence. If that was any other coach in the NRL, I don't think that would have been the case.
He'd be hosed for sure.
Ricky is to a certain extent quite lucky that he does have some, good mates in the media looking out for him. Look, like you said, great player, awesome coach. Like he's a fantastic coach. But I think maybe in the back half of this year he has got a few things wrong. I looked the other night against the Broncos. That was a game they obviously needed to win. If they won that game, they were probably safe from missing out in the top 8. And he's put Jack White in a fullback who, I can't remember the last time Jack played fullback. And then on the bench, he had Jared Croker. I know he's done it a few times this year, but Jared Croker's not someone that's going to make an impact off the bench.
Yeah.
And he also had Tom Starling. So you got a centre and a hooker on the bench against a Broncos team that have got some pretty decent front rowers and second rowers. Don't know if that was the way to go about things. Seb Chris, who'd done a pretty good job up until getting injured, 6-8 weeks ago. He'd been doing a really good job at fullback, and they've re-signed him long term, and he's playing in the centres. Jack's gone to fullback where he hasn't played for a long time. I don't know. I think Ricky personally, it's growing tiresome. His constant criticism of the referees, because there's a lot of clubs, I especially look at teams, down in the bottom 4 like the Dolphins and the Tigers and the Dragons, they get a lot more rough end of the stick from the officials than the Raiders do, and it seems to be Ricky Stuart every single week that's criticising the officials. And I think it's probably time for him to maybe look in his own backyard and, I don't know, start changing some things at the Raiders, and maybe changing his outlook. And the stuff with the Fox Sports video guy, how long ago, 6-8 weeks ago with Reece Walsh,
yeah,
it was like the world was ending when he blew up, maybe at Pat Carrigan, maybe at an official. There's been no talk of Ricky Stuart being reprimanded at all. Instead, we're getting an apology from Steve Crawley at Fox because his brother's mates with Ricky. Like, at the end of the day, you can't have, one rule for a Reece Walsh, who's a 20-year-old kid that, in the heat of the moment blew up on the field, but Ricky Stuart, who's a guy that's been in the game for, 30, 40 years, blowing up at a, poor video bloke on the sideline when, he was just doing his job at the end of the day. So, yeah, I think Ricky needs to just focus on the Raiders and getting some victories as opposed to trying to point fingers.
That was good. That was almost on one breath.
Yeah. I had a lot of things to get off my chest.
And another thing. Ricky needs to look inward rather than questioning other people. Real or ridiculous?
Oh, real, 100%. Yeah.
Do you reckon the Raiders win? Raiders are definitely a chance. But
I don't think they beat the Sharks, no. I know the Sharks were... they probably fell away in the second half of the game against the Knights, but there was a period there where it was tight. They'd been in good form up until that. They'd knocked off a couple of decent teams, Cronulla, so I think they're in a better position at the moment than the Raiders heading into round 27. And yeah, depending on what happens in the minor premiership race, which we'll touch on shortly, but Penrith could also rest players against the Cowboys on Saturday, depending on the Melbourne and Brisbane game. Cowboys could win, Roosters or South, they're playing for a spot in the finals. There's a pretty decent chance that the Raiders do miss out, and Cowboys and either Roosters or Rabbitohs finish 7th and 8th, and I think that'll probably be a better reflection of those teams' performances, because Raiders would be making up the numbers if they did scrape into the 8.
Have you tried to explain to anyone outside of someone who works in footy, like all the possible outcomes for this weekend? It's so easy to get lost in it.
Yeah, and maths is not my strong suit either, so I've found myself struggling a little bit. That's where the old ladder predictor does come in handy. That's been getting a workout, especially once I knew the Dragons were out of contention, then it made it a lot easier to leave the bias at home.
On to the Bulldogs. Their woes continued. Another disappointing loss versus Manly on the weekend. 42-24 on Sunday. Didn't look like Manly got out of second gear. They didn't have Garrick, they didn't have Turbo, they didn't have Lawton, they didn't have Paseka, they didn't have Lodge, they didn't have Osho Ole. Never gets old to me.
Nah.
They have had injury woes, but not that many. Like
the Dogs
they're at full strength
throughout the year. They have had some issues. Like Kikau was out for a long time. Josh Addo-Carr's been out with injury at different stages. They've struggled to field a full strength team for large portion of the year, but on the weekend and in the last couple of weeks, they have been pretty close to their full strength, 17. Whether I agree with all of the selections or not is a different story. They had a couple of centres out on the weekend, Jacob Kiraz and Braden Burns, but when you're getting blown away 42-24 by a team that's also missing the 8 and got a lot of players and some real quality players missing through injury, that's some alarm bells for Canterbury.
Their points difference is minus 327.
Yeah, that's pretty disgraceful.
So the next worst is West Tigers at -248. Gee whiz.
Yeah, so my biggest concern with the Bulldogs this year is that their first half of the year, they were competing in a lot of games. They won some games. They beat Melbourne as well, which was a really big win. They had a win over South Sydney during the Origin period as well, when South had a lot of players out more recently. But their second half of the year has been really disappointing. Whereas you look at last year, they sacked Trent Barrett halfway through the year because they weren't going very well. And they went on to play some really good footy in the back half of the year under Mick Potter. Now, I know Cam Ciraldo's only in his first year. It's going to take a while to implement some of the things he's bringing across from Penrith. But the main thing, the main talking point about Cam Ciraldo was his defensive structures. And, a lot of that is effort areas. And, he's coming for a club with a lot of success. But, they talk about what he brings to the club, but you're not seeing it at the moment. So players clearly aren't buying into what Cam Ciraldo is selling.
It was interesting what Ciraldo said in the post-match presser, where basically he said it's all effort. That's the big thing for them. So, they finished on 7 wins last year.
They're going to finish on 7 wins.
They're on 7 now. Yeah. I don't know. I find it tough to say they're a better team than last year.
Yeah, and they've also added
way better cattle.
They've added some pretty quality players this year. Reid Marnie, coming from a grand final winning team. I know Viliami Kikau's missed a lot of the year, so that hasn't helped. He's chewing up A, a fair bit of their cap, and B, he was one of their marquee signings. Luke Thompson obviously was out for a lot of the year, and he's on big money, and he's someone that's had a really disrupted run at Canterbury and looks like he's probably going to move on at the end of the year. So they haven't been without their issues, but there's other teams that have struggled in that department as well. The Tigers and the Dragons, I know they're sitting behind the Bulldogs at the moment, but if you look at their second half of the year compared to maybe their first half of the year, the Tigers and the Dragons have probably scratched and clawed a little bit harder than the Dogs have, and they've been probably hampered more by injury, in the second half of the year than they were in the first half. So yeah, look, the Dogs might be sitting on 7 wins, but as far as I'm concerned, they're probably the worst team in the comp right now.
Yeah, that's fair. It's interesting. So with the text messages that were doing the rounds, everyone said, well, it was 8 players who reportedly wanted out. Dogs are saying it's probably more like 4. The players are copping a lot of the heat at the moment, but as rugby league news cycle goes, eventually it will fall on Ciraldo, who has a little bit of a grace period because, as you said, it's his first year. He did a lot of great things
out of a 5-year deal as well.
Yeah. Do you think, though, let's get ahead of the news cycle here, has Phil Gould backed the wrong horse in Cameron Ciraldo?
I think it's too early to say that, but if you look at results this season, Andrew Webster is in his first year at the Warriors, and they were predicted by a lot of people, myself included, to finish in the bottom 4, perhaps with the wooden spoon, whereas Canterbury were, probably thought by a lot of people would push for a top 8 spot, maybe finish between 9th and 11th, and instead they're going to finish in 15th spot, and their second half of the year has been pretty horrendous. So if you look at it from a purely results perspective based on a 1-year sample, then yeah, obviously Andrew Webster coming out of that Penrith system has been a better signing from a coaching perspective than Cam Ciraldo, but Ciraldo's got a 5-year deal.
Yeah. There's
a plan there. They're recruiting some players. They've added quite a few players for next year. Obviously, Stephen Crichton is the big one, but they're adding some depth around him. Siwa Takiaho is coming back from the UK and looks like he's probably landing at the Dogs. So they're adding some players from good clubs that are, maybe playing backup roles like Blake Taff and Jamin Salmon. I know Kurt Mann's also been linked to the Bulldogs now as well. So they're picking at the scraps here and there, and they're adding some big names, but eventually the pressure will come onto the coach because they're recruiting a team, and the pressure will come on Gus as well.
Yeah.
Because he's signing a lot of these players. A lot of the players they signed was before...
Man's Teflon.
Yeah, it was before Ciraldo was there that he signed a lot of these marquee players like Matt Burton and Josh Addo-Carr, Reid Marnie, Viliami Kikau. They were all signed well before Cam Ciraldo came in as coach. But yeah, the pressure is going to fall onto them if, come round 6, round 8 next year, if the Bulldogs aren't improving. There certainly will be pressure.
Makes sense. I'm interested to see how Jamin Salmon goes.
I'm not sure where he's going to play. I would assume he'd play off the bench and maybe back row, similar to what he's done at Penrith, but he's kind of found himself in and out of the Penrith team at the moment. Blake Taft is another one. I don't really know where he's being signed to play. He could possibly play in the centres. He's got a lot of speed, but I don't think
Has he ever played in the centres?
I don't think so, but I mean, I'm just trying to figure out
where
he's going to play because he's not a halfback.
Yeah.
And they've signed Toby Sexton until the end of next year. Whether they think he's their long-term guy or not remains to be seen. Obviously, Burden's got the 6 wrapped up, and they've signed Stephen Crichton on pretty reasonable money to come in and play fullback. So, yeah, I don't know where Blake Taft's going to play. And then, like, Kurt Mann, is a good 14 or, good lock forward as well. But, yeah, they're signing blokes that I'm not entirely sure what their roles are going to be, but who knows? Maybe Ciraldo and Gus have a plan that we don't know about. Sign as many players as you can and worry about it later.
Wild. Well, if you can hear that sound, it is Eddie Jones crying because Cameron Murray is staying in rugby league. I was very interested to see what happened at the end of Cam Murray's contract. I thought there was a genuine chance he would try to line up for the 2027 World Cup in Australia. Not happening, just signed a long-term extension till the end of 2028. He is the captain just after turning 24 due to Renault leaving. In the opener, I said Sam Burgess. I completely forgot about Renault.
It wasn't too long before that, and they have had a bit of a leadership void, I guess, with John Sutton, Greg Inglis, Sam Burgess, and Adam Reynolds all moving on in the space of 18 months to 2 years. That's a hell of a lot of experience and a hell of a lot of guys that bleed red and green that have moved on. So Cam was the logical one, I guess the Bunnies thought, but there has been some question marks, some criticism, I guess, with the recent issues around the club. Obviously, last week was a big week for the Bunnies. Where do you stand? Do you think Cam is the right man to perhaps manage or help manage some of the bigger personalities at Redfern?
Definitely. I think so. We know he's going to be there for a long time. Key part of it. He's one of the best players. You'd think he would be a driver of standards and culture there. Now, he may not be in the same way like fire and brimstone that Sam Burgess was. And you hear about South players talk about Sam Burgess. Now they still hold him with such high regard.
Well, some of them do anyway.
Some of them do. Yeah. That's a very good point. Cam Murray's probably not the same type of captain.
No.
I know, like when Gal was captain of the Sharks, right, wasn't a big talker at all. That wasn't his thing. He always tried to lead by example. I think there's probably a fair few captains like that. Cam Murray's his own man. I don't know who else they would possibly choose who fits the bill as well as him. But you're always going to have guys like, if everything's to be believed about Trell and Cody, if they're treated slightly different as stars are. That happens at every club. I don't think that's a thing about the captain at all. So yeah, 100%. I think is Cam Murray the right captain for Souths? Real, not in one way ridiculous.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Cam Murray for the longest time was spoken about as a future leader at South Sydney, and it was no surprise when Adam Reynolds did move on. They obviously had guys like Cody and Damien Cook that are a bit older, but I was not surprised in the slightest to see Cam get the captain's armband for South, and he loves that club.
Yeah.
He grew up in the area. His dad played for South Sydney, mascot Jets Junior through and through. I was surprised to see him re-sign this early because he was contracted until the end of 25, so he did have another year plus until he had to even worry about negotiations. But I guess the timing would probably indicate that maybe they wanted some good news around the club, maybe to silence a bit of the noise that was coming out about Cam. So it's a massive boost for the club. He, in my opinion, is their best player. I know Latrell, when he's on, he's on. And same thing with Cody Walker. But week in, week out, Cam Murray is their best player. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if he's captain in New South Wales next year as well. Like you said, he's not a massive talker, but he does lead by example, and people really respect him within the game, and people want to play with him and want to play for him. So I think long term, for close to the next decade, he's going to be the captain of South Sydney. And if players in the team don't want to play for him, well, there's the door. I think he's the man to lead him towards the future and a 22nd title in the next few years.
Sweet. We finally made it here. The minor premiership battle. We've got one more round left. It's, for me, one of the most exciting seasons in a long time. Maybe not so much with the minor premiership, more towards the bottom of the 8.
Yeah, definitely.
But Penrith losing to the Eels opens everything up. I thought Penrith had the minor premiership sewn up and they would rest everyone this week. Didn't happen. Bronx can, in theory now, claim the JJ Gilton Shield against the Storm. Storm, I think, have the best record in the NRL at Suncorp.
Yeah. Oh, they've got a great record against the Broncos.
I mean, it's 95% Queenslanders.
Yeah.
So there's still what's happening. Now we're just hearing that Kevin Walters is going to rest 5 players, possibly more. Adam Reynolds is still injured. So
Carrigan's out as well.
Carrigan's out.
They're going to have a lot of players on the sidelines. I think Melbourne are probably going to rest a few. I know Jerome Hughes is out. He's got a little medial injury in his knee. They don't expect him to be out too long, which is great news for the Storm. But I would expect that Cam Munster and Harry Grant possibly won't play as well.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a few Q Cup boys getting a run in the Storm Broncos game on Thursday night. Look, it's maybe not great for TV ratings or whatever, but I understand where both coaches are coming from. But I guess the question is Broncos resting players. They play first. Penrith are now going to know where they stand in the minor premiership.
Yeah.
Race come their game on Saturday, I believe, against the Cowboys. So I don't know. It does put into question the importance that clubs place on the minor premiership. What do you think? Do you think it matters?
They place zero importance on it because it doesn't matter. We're not set up like the English Premier League.
Yeah,
like there is a postseason. Broncos haven't won since
2000 was their last minor premiership,
and that's when they did the double.
Yeah, double.
I hate that term.
Yeah,
no, but so if it's been that long, they have the chance this week, a red hot chance. To win the minor premiership, and they're going to rest players.
Yeah, they're going to rest.
That tells you all you need to know.
Like 5 of their best,
and
plus
it's not like
2
there's
out
some
injured.
great financial motivation for it as well.
Yeah, what is it? A couple 100,000?
I think it's like 200.
Yeah, I mean it's a fair coin, but for a Broncos or a Penrith especially.
But would you give that up for the chance at a premiership? Of course, you wouldn't think twice about it.
And especially with Penrith and Brisbane have both already locked in a home final.
Finals.
They can't be overtaken by Melbourne or the Wars in the last round. I guess there is a little bit of talk that, maybe if you finish first and the Storm finish fourth, who would you rather play out of the Warriors and the Storm? Could that be something that Kevin Walters and Ivan Cleary are looking at? I don't think so. I don't think you want to write off the Warriors based on especially their defence this year. Yeah. And they've got Tamari Martin coming back in this week as well, I believe. So that gives them a nice little boost, even though Luke Metcalf is out now with a hamstring injury. I wouldn't be writing them off. I wouldn't be looking past the Warriors. So I don't think that has anything to do with it. But I just think it's more to give the boys a freshen up for a week. Already locked in a home final, minor premiership. If we win it, it's a nice little cherry on top of the 27 rounds. But the 4 weeks after that is what is of paramount importance to all teams in the top 8, but obviously Penrith and Brisbane.
100% retweet.
Retweet. You can't say that anymore.
That came out of nowhere.
It's repost now.
Repost. Yeah. Sorry.
Good on you, Elon.
Right. That's it. 26 rounds in the book. Bang. One more to go. Then we're into the juicy stuff. We'll see you next week.